Stay tuned after the episode to hear our latest edition of And Then What?
When the world feels overwhelming, I turn to nature for some much-needed perspective. Thriving in the face of adversity, that's something the incredible species of our world do every day. Wow, right in front of us. I'm Chris Morgan. Join me on The Wild as we explore stories of hope and resilience in nature and what they can teach us about ourselves and each other. Listen to The Wild wherever you get your podcasts.
Previously on the Dirtbag Diaries.
People want a soul. They want a soulful experience.
I don't think anyone's like, oh, the industry's getting better today.
There's just this divide between the haves and the have-nots that's getting even worse.
If the mountain falls apart and they get these bad reviews, people stop coming back, that affects all of us that live here. When we heard the mountain was being listed for sale, I posted something kind of silly like, hey, I've got $20 in a snowboard, who's interested? And here's this guy saying something about who wants to do a feasibility study.
And so that's step on the gas, we're just flying.
There were 4 inches of solid ice on every road in downtown Bend. Every time I took a corner or entered one of the many roundabouts, my heart would skip a beat as the rear end of my truck clawed for traction. Every attempt that I made to stop was a stress test for my recently repaired ABS system. The morning after I arrived, I came out of my hotel to 3 inches of fresh snow blanketing everything in sight. This is Bend, Oregon in March. I was here not to chase snow per se, but to connect with the 3 community members at the head of a high-velocity effort to return their mountain from the decades-long grip of a private company back to the community. Chris and Dan had formed a B Corps in September, giving them a legitimate entity to manage their efforts through. And in the long run, allowing for a management strategy that prioritized things other than merely profit. Ryan Andrews had joined to structure the financial instrument behind their bid.
When we left the group of our snow-stoked heroes, they were full speed ahead.
The broker of Mount Bachelor sale had just told them what was needed to access the data room, which would effectively allow them the chance to make an informed bid on the mountain.
And they had a passionate community behind them. They were ready to take on the challenge.
Here's Dan Cochran, longtime Bend resident, on just how passionate and wide-ranging that community was.
One thing I think is important to mention, Chris and myself are obviously kind of the forefront of this effort, but we've got a group of incredible people that are working behind the scenes. One of the guys at our first meeting was a retired New York State Supreme Court justice. So I still call him Your Honor. And he says, Dan, you don't have to call me that anymore. I'm retired. We have 2 pro bono attorneys that live outside of Seattle, and they've saved this effort tens of thousands of dollars already. And there's plenty of heavy lifting to still be done. So it's those guys, it's our other members here of our board. That was one of the amazing things that we had come out of that original media coverage was these resumes that, it was like, we're putting together our dream team. It's like, well, who do you want? Well, what do we need? Kind of thing. And they were all there, and it's a whole family deal. I mean, my kids were selling raffle tickets at our October 12th event down at Drake Park last year. They understand that they have to do more things around the house because I'm out doing an interview or I'm in meetings or that sort of thing. And, I estimate I probably got about 400 hours of, volunteer hours in thus far, but it's rewarding for me, and people really appreciate it as well. Folks miss the old ski hill, feeling. And it's not just about money. We are seeing a trend shift, and Killington, it was really wild to see them doing this at the same time we were, and all of a sudden, that was announced in the paper, and it's like, oh, we're literally, it's a bi-coastal effort at the same time. So clearly, there's something larger at play here that really is meaningful to people.
So, Skylar, what exactly happened in Killington?
Well, Powder sold Killington Resort to a group of local investors who turned around and immediately initiated a plan to reinvest $30 million in the resort over the next 2 years.
So this trend shift that Dan mentions, It might be kind of a newer thing, but local ownership of ski resorts is hardly a new idea. I mean, that's how all these resorts started in the first place. And now more and more, we start to see things like Mount Bachelor Community Incorporated. It's innovating on the financial structure, but we have seen other places operate independently on their own. Just look at Mount Baker. It's been locally owned and operated from its inception in 1953. There's several great examples. Bogus Basin outside of Boise. Yeah, it's not unprecedented.
You're totally right. And this innovation might be the next evolution of local ownership. But MBCI isn't even the only group pushing for new models or the reclaiming of ski resorts by communities just this year.
Yeah, I mean, another great example is I've heard of this magical place called Eldora.
Yeah, so Eldora Mountain Resort was purchased by Powder in 2016. And in 2024, it too was up for sale. In their case, though, the nearby town of Nederland was vying for ownership. They argued that the mountain was a big part of the community and that establishing local control and keeping profit in the community were major driving factors in their bid to own the mountain. In July of 2025, Nederland announced that it would issue municipal revenue bonds backed by the resort's earnings to finance their purchase. The town and Powder signed a deal to commit to this purchase and outlined a 2-year transition in ownership. The idea of running a ski resort as a B Corp, the same kind of multi-stakeholder company structure that MBCI was built on, had also been executed successfully. It happened down in Taos in New Mexico when billionaire Louis Bacon bought Taos Ski Valley in 2014.
Despite all these models seemingly available and Powder's willingness to engage with some of them, JP Morgan was still putting up hoops for MBCI.
And why is JP Morgan Chase involved in this again?
Basically, when a business does big transactions like this, they bring in banks or financial firms to handle the logistics of the deal. That company typically walks away with a percentage of the total transaction as a fee for their work. And so they have a big vested interest in making sure deals get done.
Right. So at the end of episode 1, autumn waned and MBCI had just been incorporated. Then they were given their first hoop by the bankers.
So our understanding, the seller, is they want a very clean offer that's all cash. It's not some kind of complicated offer that's like the seller carries back a note and pays over 5 years and they want a cash buyer. That's really hard to do if you're trying to raise capital from, anywhere from like 2,000 to 30,000 people, right? That takes a long time. It also creates a really big chicken and egg problem. So how do we structure that? Well, what we've come down to is stage 1, is basically these 3 stages.
So Ryan had the explanation of MBCI's financing dialed down to the nines, and he explained it in great detail. Because we're not a finance podcast, we're just going to hit the key points.
Step 1 is to go out to these really strategic investors, high net worth and ultra high net worth investors that can essentially write really big checks, several $100,000 to several million.
The bankers need to see a lot or all of the money in just a few accounts. So if they're looking at a potential $200 million sale, MBCI needs to round up over $100 million from just a few stoked rich folks to sign this deal.
Now we own the mountain and the operating assets of Mount Bachelor. But we haven't quite achieved our goal of like community ownership. It's kind of like owned by a bunch of wealthy people.
And this is where stage 2 kicks in.
Part of the sell that we're telling these large investors is our goal is to provide you with some liquidity after closing.
Liquidity shortly after closing. This means that those big checks that just got cashed, the people who wrote them are going to get some of that cash back, ideally within the first year after sealing this deal. This is where the real innovation comes in.
What we can do is turn around and put together an investment offering that is not just to ultra high net worths, but anybody could be involved.
And this would come in the form of a securities offering accessible to anybody who wanted to have a share of the mountain. It has to go through regulatory approval and some other hoops, but thanks to the Jobs Act from about a decade ago, this sort of equal access opportunity is possible, and it's been proven.
Stage 3 would be, what does this look like going, ongoing. Our mentality is like, once we own this thing, we should own it forever.
This means that ongoing mountain operations are, at a high level, driven by those community investors. Want a new lift? Well, shareholders get to vote on a capital raise. You want to remove fast tracks? Hold a vote. Want to get your money out? Well, there would be periodic opportunities to allow liquidity for current investors. And this is where the community really gets to put its money and its mouth in control of their mountain. As far as my research found, this sort of offering has never been put together for a major ski area like Bachelor. This right here was uncharted territory, and MBCI was ready to quest into the unknown.
So we get a meeting with, our big investor and the investment bankers and everything. And we're like, look, okay, we did everything you asked us to do. And we expect them to just, now welcome us with white glove treatment. And instead they basically like slammed the door in our faces. And we're like, nope, we're going to move the goalpost now. That's not good enough. Now what we need to see is enough money to do the whole deal in a bank account now. They essentially slammed the door in our face and we're like, we won't even let you write an offer. And so then it was just like, that was like a car accident.
This is not how senior bankers do business, right? They're not interested in the crowdfunding model. It's not familiar to them. Like, it's scary. It's intimidating to them, right? Like, that's what we are to these guys. And I think that's a big part, potentially, of why we're not being allowed this opportunity.
The three of us on the phone were just like so bummed afterwards. And I was maybe the least bummed of everybody because I've been around this game a lot and dealt with a lot of folks back in New York and on Wall Street and investment bankers that have big egos. And so they have to maintain their reputation by not just letting this, upstart ragtag community group in the door to make a deal with them. They're trying to protect their client, not waste their time, not waste their client's time and everything. So, but it was certainly like a bummer. And, then instead we were like, well, what are we going to do?
All the while, time is ticking, and MBCI is pretty sure that the other prospective buyers, they have a jump on the game. The new year rolls around, and MBCI comes into 2025 with a plan in motion.
So then we turned around and, wrote a letter and FedExed it straight to the board of directors and chairman of Powder Corp. And we're like, hey, we want to buy the mountain. We're willing to pay more than anybody else because we're not out shopping for mountains. We're not looking at this as just like an economic investment amongst many economic investments. We're trying to buy our backyard. And we want it, and it's Mount Bachelor or nothing for us. And we think we're willing to pay more than anybody else because we think we can get more revenue out of this mountain with more goodwill than anybody else. And so talk to us. Just give us a chance. Give us a shot. And, that kind of thawed things out maybe slightly.
This is kind of like knocking on the back door after getting turned away at the front.
They didn't respond to the letter. We put this like hard deadline on the letter, like let us know by Thursday, next Thursday, blah, 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 and everything. And like as soon as we shipped it, I was like, oh, they're going to blow our deadline, if nothing else, to just not give us any negotiating power. And so, of course, they did. They blew our deadline and wouldn't contact us, but they certainly know about us. And so I think they're interested to see how this comes together at a grassroots level.
Skylar, they're confident they can run this resort well enough to remain profitable in the face of the very consolidation that emerged as a solution to the problems facing independently run resorts. Like, they think they can do this, right?
Yeah, and they have their reasons to support this confidence. But we haven't even covered all of the problems that consolidation helps smooth out.
Which includes one very, very big elephant in the room that we quickly mentioned last episode. We can't ignore it now.
Let's talk about climate change.
This is Graham Zimmerman, friend of the show, notorious big mountain pro athlete, reformed geologist, and director of the Athlete Alliance program at Protect Our Winters, also a Bend resident.
I mean, we've been talking about this threshold of 1.5 degrees Celsius for a long time. That's the thing that we have to keep things below. We are like officially above that threshold. And it like was barely a blip on the news, but that is really, really important. The scientific community is very concerned, and the rest of us should be as well. There is more scientific consensus on that than most things. When we look at the reports from the IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change, they're saying that there are approximately 30 years of change that are baked into the cake. As in, if we decarbonized tomorrow, we would still see 30 years of change take place.
That's kind of frightening.
Yeah, and we don't exactly seem ready to decarbonize tomorrow.
No, no, we don't.
We need to be really conscious of what that change is and how it is impacting the communities around us and the industries around us. And in particular, we of course need to be thinking about marginalized communities that are on the front lines of this crisis. Those are the folks that are most impacted and oftentimes have the least ability to prepare for those impacts. But the broader economic impacts of climate are massive and are impacts that are most definitely impacting ski areas. When we talk about the ways that climate is impacting winter generally, we're looking at shorter winters, so starting later, ending earlier, and we're looking at warmer winters, which means that the freezing level when storms do come through is going up, which means less snow. And obviously, ski areas are places that rely on snow, and even when they're not getting snow, they rely on cold temps for blowing snow.
But isn't climate change, I mean, realistically, like, it's really only going to crush the low elevation resorts, right? The ones up high are still going to get dumped on. I mean, Mount Bachelor, the year of the sale, had some of the deepest stays on record.
Yeah, I mean, sort of. So the vulnerability of resorts to climate change is super nuanced because there are just so many factors at play when we talk about regional climate and climate in general. Some weather patterns will result in more snow for a while, even at low elevations, and others will dry up really rapidly. The interaction of climate change on local weather is endlessly complicated, but broadly speaking, vulnerable resorts are predicted to start dropping due to climate around 2050. And some especially vulnerable ones, like Mount Lemmon in Arizona, they've already had their first snow-starved seasons without a single day of skiing. But the ones in less vulnerable regions, including Mount Bachelor, they still have a bit longer to go. The Mountain West, in general, is predicted to experience persistent snow loss in about 40 to 60 years if we continue business as usual. That being said, in the United States, the ski industry has already suffered an estimated $5 billion hit in the last 2 decades due to climate. And this isn't just hearsay or speculation. All of this data comes from the same model that the Olympics and many other corporations, as well as investment firms, use to analyze how climate change will impact the future of their sports and their investments. Daniel Scott and Robert Steiger at the University of Waterloo used this model to analyze the industry as a whole, and they were gracious enough to provide me with the study that outlined these exact findings.
Nerd.
You know it.
When we're talking about climate change, we're talking about these broader trends that are taking place over decades. Again, like we will still have big pulses, we'll have variability, but like the general trend is towards less snow. And lots of times that means more like rain days and things like that as well, which if you're talking about how much it costs to go skiing for a day, rain days are not a great way to make money for these resorts.
Here's ski industry expert Heather Hansman again.
Say you're Vail and you have resorts in Vermont and California and Colorado, and it doesn't snow in the Northeast, and like it gets hot and rainy in Tahoe, but you have resorts in Colorado that are like doing okay, then maybe you can float the whole thing for a season. So like being geographically diversified at a time when winters are getting warmer and more variable and changing a lot is sort of like a play towards long-term sustainability, I think.
So this is a model for how resorts weather this coming storms. These big conglomerates, they can smooth over volatile weather because it's often regional, right? So if it's a bad year in Colorado and you've bought your Epic Pass, you can use that someplace else. And with customers all across these geographic zones buying a pass like Epic or Icon, and often buying them in the spring before there's even a hint of a La Nina or an El Nino before the upcoming season, the conglomerates can budget and sort of fly above the chaos of bad snow and poor day pass sales.
Yeah, and every resort is kind of shooting to get open by the beginning of December. By Christmas time, they kind of already know whether they're going to be in the red or in the black. If a resort can't get open by Christmas, if it can't rely on snow by then, it's more than likely not turning a profit that season. And resorts are already across the board facing mounting depreciation, snowmaking and maintenance costs, and not seeing consistent increases in revenue. All of this paints a bleak picture for these independent resorts. But MBCI is confident that they can overcome these challenges at Bachelor, and they have a plan. More after the break.
All right, every time I go to a live event, people come up to me and they say, I'm going to write a short for you guys one day. Well, that moment could be today. From now until November 16th, we are accepting submissions for the shorts. You'll find all the information you need at the Write Us tab at our website, dirtbagdiaries.com. We'll put links in the show notes. Pay attention to the instructions. Seriously, it helps both you and us. Trust me, it makes a big difference. You make this a community, your voice is valued, and we want to hear from you. Get your story in by November 16th. I was on a run the other day, and I turned onto a little spur trail I hadn't been down before, and boom, there was this giant cedar tree. It was over 100 years old, and I thought, dang, you've seen a lot since you're a little seedling, and it made me appreciate all the trees around me. Sure makes the world a better place. That's just one of the reasons why Oboz Footwear has been committed to planting trees for each pair of hiking shoes sold. As a certified B Corporation, Oboz cares about their impact on the planet and invests in a number of initiatives that aim to restore the natural environment. Since 2007, they've helped plant over 6.6 million trees. You might even be able to see some of those trees in Oregon, where Douglas fir trees are planted to restore areas affected by wildfire. Thanks, Oboz, for supporting the show, but more importantly, thanks for planting trees. To find your next pair of footwear, check out obozfootwear.com/lovehiking. Oboz Footwear. Love hiking. Deception Pass State Park is one of my favorite places to visit at this time of year. Like we do it, I think, almost every year. I'm not alone in that. It is one of the most popular parks in Washington State. The trail running is perfect. There are Doug firs. There's views of the Salish Sea. And we even watched a partial eclipse there. It was pretty sweet. The kids love hiking along the beach. It's all just very Pacific Northwest. The Washington Discover Pass is your key to accessing Washington State's parks like Deception Pass, recreation sites, natural areas, and more. When you purchase a Discover Pass, you aren't just buying a parking pass, you're helping care for public lands. You're directly supporting conservation and recreation opportunities. You're keeping bathrooms open and trails maintained. You're caring for forests and protecting seashores. Our state lands belong to all of us, and the Discover Pass helps us protect and enjoy them together. So get your Discover Pass at discoverpass.wa.gov. The Diaries is made possible by Diaries Plus members. And guess what? That could be you. That's right. If you're enjoying our regular episodes, the shorts, interviews, our And Then What series on public lands, or a mix of it all, please consider becoming a Diaries Plus member. It's ad-free listening, but maybe more importantly, it's about knowing that you've stepped up to support something you believe is worthwhile and the delight of something you want to see in your feed, something you believe needs to be there, because that's how Diaries Plus members feel. Come power the show. The link is in the show notes. Thank you.
We understand from the former GM that there's a potential 20% upside in pass revenue and with the community model. What we've seen, as I discussed earlier, is there are locals that just don't buy passes anymore. We understand that the 12-day pass went away. The former GM set that up to be a community family model where it aligned with the kids' 12-week passes. So the parents would get a 12-day pass and they could go ski while their kids were in lessons, right? That's gone. Powder took that away and they changed it into a 4-day pass. It's more expensive. They're like, you can buy 3 of them, sure, but yeah, at what cost? Like, the other option is they could get season passes. But I mean, this is a big thing is, accessibility is a huge thing that we talk about here. And some of that has shifted, and we'd like to see that come back. Chris is brilliant. That's his wheelhouse, and he found an incredible model with the Willamette Valley Vineyards that, allows the wine enthusiasts to invest in the vineyard, and they can either take dividends or have that come back to them in the form of discounts in cases of wine or special events or those sort of things. Most people don't take dividends out. We see the same opportunity here where the locals and beyond, right? Mount Bachelor community, it's not limited by geographical location, right? Our Mount Bachelor community is far beyond. We've got families that come from Atlanta for 35 years, who want to invest $500,000 to $1 million because they make one trip out here every year and they have a very special tie to this mountain. It's that opportunity for everybody to have a voice, to have a vote, and to be able to invest and have a little piece of ownership in a mountain. The whole idea of a community-minded mountain ownership model is that we create this economy that money is made here and money is spent here and reinvested here. Not only in the mountain, but the town itself. We're 20 miles away from Mount Bachelor. So, our food and beverage, all of our lodging, all our retail stores that are here, the mountain brings in approximately $200 million a year in kind of periphery revenue for the community. So it's one of our biggest concerns is that this mountain is not only one of the biggest employers, but it's also one of the biggest revenue generators. And so the security of making sure that the mountain is running appropriately in line with what the locals want, but also running consistently in a way that makes sure people keep coming here. Because if the mountain falls apart and they get these bad reviews, people stop coming back, that affects all of us that live here.
We have talked to local government officials. So our latest representative for our 5th district, Janelle Bynum, and she wants to work on a collaborative effort to really bring back kids ski free, just like Bill Healy, the original owner, and the Pape family had in the past, where they had every Friday 6th graders ski free. We'd like to bring something like that back. And Janelle Bynum already said, hey, if you guys bring this back, we'll figure out a way to pay for it. It's not going to be any shirt off your back. We're going to figure out how to do this and make it happen.
Really, our goal is to try to be good stewards, again, as you stated, regardless of the outcome. We'd love to be a voice for whether it's us owning it for the community or whether it's another entity that manages to come in here and purchase it.
So people aren't just passionate about Bachelor. It is, in fact, an economic powerhouse for the region. It's the 5th largest employer in Central Oregon. And as Dan said, it brings in a wealth of periphery economic activity for Bend and Sun River. And MBCI's pitch to reintegrate the community ideals with the mountain ops, it seems pretty good.
Right? It's unfortunate that the profit maximization model that private equity is quite literally indebted to, and these private companies too, it removes this sort of long-term thinking about generational returns and the sort of externalities like community goodwill and local government engagement. When I brought this up with Chris, he doubled down on the details of just how MBCI envisions their approach would reinvigorate the local economy.
So if we were to talk about how this creates a circular economy, what it's really doing is adding to the multiplier effect for the economy, meaning we're going to keep dollars here in the community and invest them to grow. How that works is very similar to how the cruise lines work, where they stabilize their risk model. So if you were to buy 100 shares of a cruise line stock, take a cruise, you're going to get a $100 credit. We would want to use a similar model. We fashioned ours off Willamette Valley Vineyards. And Jim and Jan Bernot, who started that company, meaning we will give you either a credit or a dividend. The Forest Service likes the dividend model better just because it creates more equity, more equality through the way that those benefits are distributed. And then we'll take it from that bottom line where we distribute it. If you decide to keep your dividend with us, then we will give you an added benefit. So now from that distribution, we've put that dividend right back into our top line and stabilized our revenues and made them much more predictable. And we've also now given everybody who is an owner incentive to use the product more. So now we've said, hey, you have a benefit. By being an owner, you have an added benefit where you might get percentage off of food and beverage. You might get a percentage off of, in addition to your dividend, off of a season pass product or a day pass product. And so now we've not only created raving fans, we've also created ownership raving fans. And when you own something, you're much more likely to use it.
It's almost as if they're creating a microcosm of an equity firm with the community being its stockholders. That's an interesting evolution. What about passes though? We spent a lot of time talking about the passes on the first episode, the big ones, the Epic and the Icon. That's a core advantage for big conglomerates like Alterra and Vail.
Yeah, this is true. And Mount Bachelor, though it's owned by Powder and not Alterra, was a partner resort on Alterra's Icon Mega Pass, giving all Icon Pass holders some degree of access to the mountain and opening it up to a much broader market. It wasn't clear at the time whether a successful bid by MBCI would be the end of this partnership, but Chris shared his thoughts on how their model might evolve this as well.
The demand maximization models made it so you have to make that decision. Are you going to go a fourth time this year? So you might have 3 days that equal a season pass. So you may, if you're going to possibly ski for that fourth day, you may as well go ahead and bite the bullet on a season pass. So they've really, really hiked up the rates on those 1 to 4 day tickets in order to drive maximization to that preseason pass. So that way it does stabilize revenues, but I believe that our circular economy and enthusiast ownership model is really the natural next evolution for this demand maximization. Because if you can have some sort of benefit, you don't have to be a season pass holder or no go at all. You can now have access to that 1 to 4 day by keeping the dividend or the benefit with the company and then use that dividend and whatever sort of credit it entails to purchase a 1 day pass or have a discounted 1 day pass. It's not going to break the bank. And then part of that circular economy means when we give that dividend out, it gets reinvested right back into the company. We also are not exporting by having a local enthusiast owned model. We're not exporting money out of state. We are really reinvesting it here into the operations, the employees, and a thriving economic region in Central Oregon.
So, Skylar, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like what they're saying is that because Mount Bachelor, it's a successful business, it's turning a profit right now. In the coming years, it doesn't seem like climate change is going to completely obliterate this resort. It's got a little bit of time. But it seems like what they can do is that they can take the profit of the mountain and then reinvest it back into the mountain, back into the community, instead of having that profit just leave the community and go to an out-of-state shareholder or out-of-state company, right?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. And all this while opening up the opportunity to be a shareholder to the very people who have a personal stake in the mountain and the region itself. Winter rolled on. The team kept scrambling and trying to get a seat at the table, and late that winter, reports emerged that Powder Corps had indeed reached a deal to sell Bachelor. On March 14th, the bid window closed. Powder had never even bothered to hear out Mount Bachelor Community, Inc.
The bid window to buy Mount Bachelor is now closed after a nearly year-long fight.
Isabella Warren spoke with the local citizen group looking to buy Mount Bachelor.
In an update sent Monday to supporters, the group said it was unable to submit a bid after not raising enough funding in time for the deadline. But co-owner Dan Cochran says the group is not done fighting.
That doesn't mean that the mountain has sold. It just means that the bidding window has closed. So that could mean they have a buyer, but it could also mean that there are negotiations between multiple buyers, Or it could mean something that we were told early on in the process, and that is if John Cummings of Powder does not get the price that he's looking for, that he wouldn't sell it.
So Powder closes bidding, and this sends the media and locals into a speculative frenzy. What's the word on the street?
Well, interestingly enough, there are whispers that Altera was ultimately the successful buyer, and a lot of people were expressing excitement around this. The reason being that Altera has the funds to reinvest in the mountain without the sort of stigma that had built around Vail in the last couple of years. You got to remember that just a month earlier, Park City Ski Patrol had gone on strike for 13 days in protest of the meager wages Vail was offering them.
And Bachelor was already a partner mountain on Altera's Icon Megapass. So a purchase by Altera, people felt like it wouldn't really change it that much. If anything, it might be a good thing.
Yeah, it would essentially be a handoff from a smaller private company to a larger private equity firm.
So when did the news drop?
Well, it didn't. In April, Powder announced that the mountain had not been sold, and they were walking back their whole plan to sell the mountain. This was the same week that the NASDAQ Composite saw its worst sell-off since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. They lost approximately 4.84% of its value. In a market like that, a lot of players start to hold their breath. If Altera and Vail were interested beforehand, this uncertainty might have tipped them back from the brink. Powder themselves were forced to press pause on their future plans until they have some semblance of an idea as to what is actually going down.
Once you let this cat out of the bag, though, it's pretty hard to put it back. The fervor of the local community around this idea, around a community-owned resort, it gave a lot of weight and a lot of hope. Did the ball stop rolling?
Well, NBCI recognized this shift, and again, they were frustrated by the lack of transparency they continually experienced during their efforts. But you're totally right. That ball did keep rolling.
It was one of these things where we always thought that it was the long game.
We had a pretty good sense of what John Cummings and Powder wanted. We think there was a massive disparity in price, and we also had a pretty good sense of what people were offering and what the market thought the price should be, and they weren't even close. For us, we see this as a long game and actually is kind of advantageous for us. We've got more time to continue working on the different avenues that we have to try to make this happen for the community still.
So I really don't feel like it's over. This is going to be an ongoing thing. And this community is just so passionate about that mountain that I don't see it being an issue that's ever going to be off of a burner. It might go to the back burner for a little while, but it's never not going to be on the stove. If it wasn't part of the identity of the town, it wouldn't be such an issue. But because it's part of the culture and part of the identity, it is how people see themselves here. What I really think this means for the Bend community at large, I'm really hoping that's going to be good news and that we see more maintenance expenses taken care of, like the power issue. I know that Powder is putting in some maintenance capital expenses into making sure that Northwest turns and has power. I'm really hoping that there's also some growth CapEx, so meaning some dollars towards growth to really update some amenities such as Sunrise Lodge. I do think that including kids under 12 ski free with a season pass holder is a great step forward. It gets folks there and it helps grow the sport. Yeah, see more of that in the short run. In the long run, I think the track record from 2021 to 2025 speaks louder than any words I can say.
I caught up with Chris and Dan only a few days after this announcement, and when I asked them what was next, they were already on top of it.
Chris and I just met yesterday, and we had some conversations about that. And, you know, there's really a few different avenues that we're exploring at this point.
Step one, catch our breath. Step two, reach back out to Powder and say, hey, obviously this is something you had in mind. You didn't get the deal that you wanted. What do you want? What's the dollar value that's going to move the needle on this? You know, we went to him with a high net worth who was willing to show him the bank account and that he had the liquid net worth that they were looking for. I know that we were late to the table when they really started the bidding process, and around on Halloween, and we were few weeks late, but we are very serious. And we've also had other big investors call them directly. So if there's a way to joint venture with them or see if there's a pathway forward that includes the community to purchase it outright and they just didn't get what they're asking for, that would be step one. Step two, joint venture. So, hey, this community is eager to see this resort thrive. Let us take care of the maintenance capital expenses and please put your dollars towards the growth expenses. And then we can have a thriving resort that is around for generations to come and can withstand impacts from an uncertain economy as well as an uncertain climate future. It's one of those old sayings, many hands make for easy lifting. And so a joint venture would work really well in this scenario.
Especially seeing how it worked at Killington. And if things, work out at Eldora, which I think is really hopeful, we're still very interested, and we know the community model works.
It must have been such a bummer for that group because so much work. They put in so much time into doing this, and it must have felt like they really had a chance. Like as they got more investors, they got more people on board. It just kind of bums me out. You spent a lot of time on the story together. Like, you got to know the people involved. You saw how much effort they put into it. You learned, we both learned a lot about the ski industry and the business of skiing. What are your takeaways? Like, what do you think about all this?
This was a really exciting moment in the community. I can't remember this much hope and optimism surrounding conversations about ski resorts since I was a kid, honestly. It might sound a bit dramatic, but when I went to Bend in March, when I talked to these people and I talked to people in town, there was this sort of glimmer of hope for a better future. The kind of glimmer that surrounds a utopia or something. And when a conclusion finally emerged, it really felt like those flames of gritty hope had been doused. And unnecessarily so, it seemed. It wasn't as if these dreams were far-fetched, like everything was there. The new reality seemed very possible. It was even rational. But it all fell apart with the sort of pain and the residual what-ifs of like some sort of right person, wrong time breakup trope. Left behind is this like twisted sample of almost a representative of a fractured nation, like one where wealth inequality is at all-time highs and our sense of community is at all-time lows. Ultimately, though, it's just skiing, and it's a great privilege and far from a necessity of life. But I surely cannot be the only one left with this sense, right?
It's really interesting, and I want to be careful how I talk about this, right? Because, it's a pretty exclusive thing if we're being really honest about it. And so I'm careful about it when I talk about it. But there is this feeling that I experience with skiing, that it's very personal. It feels like a little bit of a loss. This whole thing is wrapped up in my life. It's been a huge part of it. It's been a huge part of my kid's life. And I have so many good memories of it. And when you get these big companies that are involved in it, that are just there to sort of maximize profit, and you see this place that you have this relationship with, this community resort, right? And you see it get run in this way, it is painful. Crystal, it's owned by Alterra, we take our trailer up all the time. It's been a huge part of our family. And they made some switch, and I won't bore you with the details, but you can see the writing on the wall of we're going to get priced out of this. And they're doing it because they're maximizing profit. That's their right. I get it. But at the same point, it kind of hurts. One, it's it hurts because you can't go back in time. Skiing will not be what it was 20 years ago or 40 years ago. But I think that there's something deeper. And I think it expands past just skiing, is that you watch these companies manage these resorts from a distance. And you can't really tell whether it's just ineptness or whether it's just straight up smart, high IQ greed. And I don't know which one's better, but you see it. And the sad part about it is ski resorts are kind of this magic thing. You zoom out on the history of these resorts and you see the same thing is that, in those years after the war, so many people came together. They weren't thinking they were going to get rich off of this whole thing, but they thought to themselves, wouldn't it be nice if our community had something like this? And they built things. And it had this feeling of just people coming together. And that's one of the coolest things about humans. And slowly, like when this ineptness or greed or whatever it is comes in and slowly erodes that, it just hurts a little bit. And it hurts because it's not just happening there, but you get the sense that this same thing is happening in all sorts of industries in our world right now. And that's pretty scary when you think about the same forces are driving healthcare or how people run hospitals. And that's frightening. It makes me feel sad that that's how we've approached things like this. Because like on a level, I think things like this that are built by people, for people, with the idea of sharing something good are really, really important in this world.
Why does skiing matter? When I think about my first experiences in the mountains, when I think about where I fell in love with going to the mountains, it was at a ski area. That's where I discovered this thing that in my life has blossomed into going to the Karakoram to try mountains that have never been done before. But it's just that initial interaction is something that has added so much value to my life. And that is something that ski areas offer. And giving people that experience and then also giving people those stories about the changing world that we're living in and getting people outside to breathe fresh air and do cool shit is so important. And ski areas do that in a really meaningful way. And that's something that I think does have a lot of value. More than anything, what is giving me hope and lighting my fire behind this work right now is my 4-month-old daughter. When I think about the world that I want her to grow up in, it is not only a place with clean air and clean water and justice. It is a place where we can go skiing. It is a place where she gets to experience snow throughout her entire life. It is a place in which she gets to go to the mountains and see these beautiful places that I've had the ability to go see. And that's something I want for her, and that's something I want for everybody, to at least have that opportunity. When I think about Mount Bachelor and its future, the thing that I want is for Bend to continue to be a place where me and my family can get out in the mountains and be inspired. And that's something that the broad community is able to do. And Bachelor existing in Central Oregon is something that I consider a really good thing. And I'm really happy it's here.
Graham touches on this sense that we outdoor enthusiasts can all relate to, I think, that the seemingly shallow and apparently selfish act of skiing has roots that actually run quite deep. Joy, community, family, inspiration. These interactions with the natural world fundamentally enrich our lives. And to remove them would leave a hole, and not only for us now, but for future generations.
I've taken kind of a strong stance as a father with my kids where I have not put them in these kind of club sports or team sports related activities, and they're still pretty young, but I've not put them in those sports really intentionally, because I've been no, the activities that our family is going to do are going to be sports that we can all do together and can enjoy together. And that for us is skiing, downhill skiing and snowboarding, cross-country skiing. What I want to give my kids is something that they can do for their whole life, and something that I can do with them and we can do as a family for our whole life. And is not me driving them around and watching them, but is me participating with them and teaching them and sharing them something. And so, for me, snowboarding on my own isn't even that important to me now. But snowboarding or skiing with my kids is super fun, and sharing it with, the next generation and seeing how much they love it reminds me of oh man, it is really fun to slide down a mountain in the snow.
These hobbies that we have fundamentally are a way to bring people together, and they change lives, not just amongst families, but amongst whole communities. And it's through this that better lives and better worlds are possible. All it takes is a few people who care a whole awful lot. People like Chris.
I have an agreement with one of my students that if he gets all A's and B's, that he has a ride up to the mountain anytime he wants to go to the mountain. Now, the big brothers and big sisters and the current owner, so Powder, got this guy a pass and all the gear. The only thing he's lacking is a ride up to the mountain. And so he fulfilled his end. He got A's and B's, and so he has an unlimited lift up to the mountain anytime he wants to go. And it turns out his addiction to skiing was the motivating factor for him to get all A's and B's and start finding a little bit of direction in his life. And I think it's really been nice just for him to have conversations and see that somebody cares and someone's going to be there for you. Just shows that it's more than just a hobby. It really is a lifestyle and something that affects positive change. So really what's going on is I think there's just a lot of uncertainty now for Powder Corp compared to last August when this process got going. It's just one of these things that we're all exhausted right now. It wouldn't surprise me if in a couple of years we're back at the negotiating table and making this happen.
We want to give a special thanks to Chris Porter, Dan Cochran, and Ryan Andrews for taking the time to speak with us time and time again, as well as Graham Zimmerman and Heather Hansman for helping round out our view of the ski world. We reached out to the mountain management at Bachelor, as well as Powder, Vail, and Alterra for comment, but did not hear back. Our stories come from friends of friends, and from you, our community. If you have a compelling idea for a guest or a story lead, please give us a shout. You can email us at editor@ducktapethenbeer.com. Thanks to the many folks who've recently become Diaries Plus members and to those that continue to support. It is the difference between the show being here and not. It allows us to tackle big projects like this one. We're very psyched and grateful for you. Want another way to help? There is a great way to do that. It is called writing us a review on Apple Podcasts. It helps others find the show and keeps us on top of the charts. Music today from Our Many Stars, Sunshapes, Archery, Herman Sparks, Pastek Joya, Sitka, Fields of Etheria, Chill Horizons, Pedelm, and JT Ruff. The tracks are courtesy of the Artists or Track Club. Jacob Bain and Nis Koto composed our theme song. This episode was produced by Skylar Perwins, Becca Call, and me, with incredible editing help from Evan Phillips. Illustration by Walker Cahal. Becca is our executive producer. I'm Fitz, and you've been listening to the Dirtbag Diaries. Thanks for tuning in. Welcome to And Then What, the segment where we break down the headlines and figure out what the hell's happened since then. As the federal government shutdown continues, concerns and confusion about what's happening on public lands, particularly in national parks, has only risen. You've probably seen the news reports. We're all curious. What's actually happening on the ground? Are parks open? Are they collecting fees? Are the rangers working? Turns out it's complicated, and there's not a uniform answer. We caught up with David Lampham, Vice President of Regional Programs for the National Parks Conservation Association, to get a few answers. So, David, right now, we are weeks into a federal shutdown. There's no real end in sight. We've been, reaching out to people, asking questions. We found there hasn't been necessarily a blanket approach or application to how the parks have been shut down. What's happening at Mount Rainier National Park is different than, say, like Utah's Mighty Five, Bryce Canyon and Zion Arches, Capitol Reef. We had a staff member down at J Tree, and it looked like the rangers were basically volunteering. It seems like it's just this complete array of responses to how this is happening. Is that what you guys are seeing too?
I don't think that's a speculation. I think that's that's the case. That's what's happening on the ground. While the parks themselves are incredibly diverse and those resources are incredibly diverse, what's not diverse is the park's obligation to protect them, to protect the natural and the cultural resources. And there might be gates open and a visitor center open managed by a park friends group. But by and large, what we're hearing is that when people go into the parks, they're not really seeing a whole lot of NPS rangers. And in a very few cases, they might be seeing volunteers. This is really a case where we're basically leaving it up to, we're just trusting people's best judgment to not harm our national parks, which I think experience has told us is just not what happens.
Mm-hmm.
And these are really sensitive resources, and folks need some type of support or interpretation.
I mean, obviously, like the Utah is an interesting one where the state government stepped forward to help kind of temporarily fund it. There's going to be a limit to the amount of time they can do that for. What are some of the good examples? Because I think there is a moment where it's clear people are trying their best to come around and gather around for national parks.
It's such an interesting situation because for NPCA, like, we live and breathe national parks. Like, we really love national parks. And one of the things that we want most is for people to have those experiences. And we know people are going in and they're having basically people are just kind of buying their ticket, going into the park, and then just, whatever happens, happens. They're not getting the interpretation they've come to see. But even amid these circumstances, you have this whole ecosystem of people who really love these places. So you're seeing the friends group step up, you're seeing volunteers step up, you're seeing campground hosts step up, right? And for me, it really does warm my heart, literally, just to think there's all of these people who are park adjacent. And even when the national park rangers who know these places the best, who've spent their whole lives working in and trying to protect these places, have to sit it out on the bench, right? When they're needed most. There's still a whole nother group of folks who are just jumping in, ready to help in the places that they can, where they can, because they love these places so much. But the other part that I don't ever want to get lost is that all of this is happening, right, because we've seen 25% cut in national park rangers, that the government has shut down, and that the federal government has decided we want to try to basically pry these gates open, even though real harm could occur. Right. And so there's really kind of this spectacle being made to say, hey, there's no problem here.
Mm-hmm.
But just beneath that surface veneer is the real harm, the harm of crowds of people going into some of the most remarkable places in the country, places with deep cultural resources, places with antiquities, without basic support, which is just frankly inappropriate, right? People get access to these places, but the long-term impacts could actually be really devastating. So there's a lot at stake.
There is a side of this where, you were on the show earlier, you talked about what a fragile moment this is for national parks, because the reality is staffing is way down. And last time you were here, you were sort of pointing out that a lot of the people that have stayed on, they feel this incredible duty to do so. And they're really now at this point shouldering 3 jobs, and they're maybe doing 3 jobs that aren't even in their job description of what they were hired for, but they're making it work. And it's all there. It's all coming down to this attrition. And then on top of it, in the middle of this, the Department of Interior announced that they want to lay off 2,500 employees. Is this almost sort of like the park's open? Hey, it's kind of working. We don't need this much staff. Look at this. This is a way. Is this sort of this weird argument that they're making to try to make the case that we don't need to support national parks?
That was actually a brilliant analysis. So Secretary Burgum, I think in the last couple of days, basically said, I think that we have proven that we don't need this many employees in the Department of Interior in order for things to run smoothly. So I want you to think about the irony of this all, right? I think it's a purposeful misinterpretation. So in some ways, it's almost like this perverse incentive. It's people go to these places because they love them, and then that gets twisted, and it's getting twisted into this shape where the administration's saying, yeah, I mean, look, everything's great, right? And there's no problems here. And actually, this might be the right level of staffing. And NPCA, we are fighting back on that narrative. And,
mm-hmm.
For people who listen to this awesome podcast, if they love national parks and if they're visiting national parks, that doesn't make you a bad person for loving these places and wanting to connect to them. But there's also this really important need for advocacy for folks to be able to just say very clearly to their members of Congress, to the administration, we want more from our national parks. And it's Congress's job to actually pay for them. And when Congress doesn't do their right job of supporting our national parks, that then falls to community. And community, at least for now, is stepping up, but that's going to run out too. Mm-hmm. Right? And so we're now just in this really bad situation where community is like, because we love our parks, we're going to help keep them open. But it's because the federal government isn't actually doing the right job of keeping these places open and paid for and supported. Right? That's not what Americans expect from their national parks or for their national parks.
Like the one thing that does seem pretty clear is that, to the best of our understanding, none of the parks right now are collecting fees. Do I have that right?
In many cases, those fees may have been already collected, right? So if you have a pass, you've already paid your fees, right? Yeah. But there are a lot of cases where people are they're just walking in. So you're seeing those different types of experiences, but I think by and large, folks are not actually paying entrance fees to enter.
So some of that money's already come in, but are they losing millions of dollars in entry fees right now on top of it?
They're not collecting their entry fees, and in some cases, they're also using other fees to provide certain types of services, like for emergency types of services. So they're spending some of those fee recreation dollars that had been collected in order to actually keep things going. So it's a double-edged sword in that respect. But the parks are running, they run on a very narrow budget anyway. We're worried about the money of it, but we're really worried about the resources of it, because some of that stuff is irreplaceable, right? If you harm a cultural resource, if you harm a sacred site, mm-hmm. What does that mean, right? At that point, you're impacting religious freedoms and culture. That's not even a thing you can put a price tag on. And then there's this other thing, which is reducing people's expectations. People are like, yeah, I went to a national park. I never talked to a ranger. That's just kind of how it is. And that you're setting this baseline at such a low level that we're reducing the public's faith and belief in what this system is and what it means and what it can be. And for me, that's it's just very sad because I'm so aware of what it has taken for us to build the greatest national park system in the world. And that's taken 100 years.
Right now, as Americans, how do we speak up for these parks? Obviously, we got to get through the shutdown, but how do we move forward?
Here's two very simple things. Number one, if you are going to visit right now, be so careful and thoughtful about your impacts, because we want to make sure that we can keep our parks in the best condition possible. And the other thing is, it's really important that folks actually connect with, especially their members of Congress, and just say, this is unacceptable. Nobody was saying the parks are doing a terrible job. They're so overstaffed, and all the benefits that they provide to America really suck, right? Nobody was saying that. All people were, what I would hear from people is, oh, we want more national parks. We want to have more national park rangers, right? This is a thing that was really, really working well until the administration started gutting it. And people have to say, hey, this is unacceptable. This isn't what we want from our national parks, and we're not going to stand for this. And also, if you're not a member of NPCA, please join us. We're getting folks the most important information daily, so that folks can click a button and tell the people who need to know, please don't harm our parks.
We're posting these pieces on our website, dirtbagdiaries.com, in case you want to share. And then what? Thanks to Diaries Plus members for making this reporting possible. Links are on our website and in the recent show notes. Thank you for caring about public lands.